Hi BookTube, and welcome to this week's Friday Reads. Not been a sort of prodigious reading week for me, not because of an inability to focus because of the coronavirus, but I've even though I only finished my writing my last book about 3 weeks ago, I've plunged into another one. In that respect, the coronavirus has been good for me in the sense that in the sort of forced confinement, I'm writing. So I've only read 2 books this week. One is Lissa Evans, Their Finest, and the other I read on Kindle because I'm not buying books to be delivered because I don't really want to expose either myself or delivery drivers unnecessarily. I know it's their livelihoods, etc, etc. But I did want to read this book as part of research, what I'm currently working on. Yes, I'm writing it even as I'm researching it. And it is this, which is called Phenomenology, the Basics. But I'm going to start with fiction, as is my wont. So, Lissa Evans, I read her book Old Baggage last year, really liked it, crept into the lower echelons of my top 10. I thought it was sharp, nice acidic tongue on the main character, and had a bit of politics about it, because it was about the interwar years, post-suffragettes, when, you know, what do people, or in this case women, do with all that political energy and activism when the cause has sort of been won? You know, where does all that energy go? And one of the characters, it went into starting a sort of junior fascist league. That wasn't the main character. The main character sort of started a version of sort of venture scouts for girls. And these two sort of came into combat. But I really liked it. I thought it was really good. And I bought this straight after reading that, but I knew I wouldn't get to it because I don't really like reading the same author twice in a year. So I knew I wouldn't get to this until 2020. Now seems to be the time, possibly because it's set in the Second World War and that sort of sense. It's sort of during the London Blitz, and it had that sort of sense of confinement and being trapped. I just thought it was sort of apposite without being too directly about the coronavirus. And I'm just going to read you the blurb on the back before I go into my response to the book. It's 1940. In a small advertising agency in Soho, Catherine Cole writes snappy lines for Vida Elastic and So Be Free Gravy Browning. But the nation is in peril, all skills are transferable, and there's a place in the war effort for those who have a knack with words. Catherine is conscripted into the world of propaganda films. After a short spell promoting the joys of Swedes for the Ministry of Food, she finds herself writing dialogue for Just an Ordinary Wednesday, a heartwarming but largely fabricated true story about rescue and romance on the beaches of Dunkirk. And as bombs start to fall on London, she discovers that there's just as much drama, comedy and passion behind the scenes as there is in front of the camera. So if you're reading that, and I, you know, when I bought it, I did read the blurb, but it was the author that I wanted to buy something of, not that particular blurb. You know, this character, Catherine Cole, you know, it sounds an interesting story, a sort of liberation through necessity of women's sort of abilities to compete on a level playing field with men in the professional world. But actually, it's a whole host of characters, and her story sort of recedes into a general background against all the others. It's just not that interesting. Her story's interesting, but it's not really that developed. Certainly not as sort of centrally focused as the blurb suggests. So, for example, we get a tired old actor, male actor, whose age is working against him, so he's no longer playing leading men, but a sort of, you know, character actor, sort of the middle age. And he's nicely acerbic, sort of straddling the line between sort of maintaining suave, sophisticated poise of the leading man with his true feelings of sort of acerbity and sort of disgruntlement and dislike of everything around him. We get this awful couple called Arthur and Edith, who are both, you know, lifelong confirmed bachelors and bachelorette. And, you know, out of necessity they come together, but they're so dull, they're so boring. And they have more text in here than Catherine Cole. It makes no sense to me. So really it's quite disappointing. And in a way it's my own fault, because there are 2 types of novels that I really don't enjoy. One is the campus novel, Although I will say Elif Batuman's The Idiot bucked that trend last year, because I didn't feel it was a campus novel. It was set on a campus, but it was much more interesting about language and how people communicate, and sort of social networks are formed. When I say social networks, I don't mean virtual social networks, I mean actual social networks of people and friends and acquaintances. And the other type of novel, in addition to the campus novel I don't like, are theatre novels or film novels, novels that revolve around actors. And I say that because my background was in theatre. So I know quite a lot about that world. I know a lot of the characters. I mean, the ageing male actor here is very well written. It's very well portrayed. But to me, I'd seen it before, both in the flesh and in other fiction. It didn't do anything new for me. So in a way, it's my own fault that I didn't enjoy this novel, because, as I say, I read the blurb. Instead of picking out, oh, this is in the world of film, yawn, it was, no, this is a book by Lissa Evans. I want to read a book by Lissa Evans because I enjoyed the last book by Lissa Evans. Anyway, as you can see, I mean, this was made into a film with Bill Nye and Gemma Arterton. Maybe go see the film, because the book is just a bit of a drag, really. So I just want to give a couple of examples of her style. So the first one is, good writing, and why I enjoyed Old Baggage. So basically, the film script that Katrin has contributed to is, war propaganda movie, and suddenly the order has come on from high that they need an American in it, because America's still neutral, hasn't joined the war, and they want to try and encourage the Americans to join the war, so they decided to stick an American in the movie, even though it's Dunkirk and there were no Americans at Dunkirk. Anyway, couldn't they use an English actor doing the accent, I mean? Not unless we want the USA to side with Germany, says the old hand actor. Good line. Great line, and she can do that, but there's not enough of that in the 400 odd pages of this. Old Baggage is about 240 pages. Those lines rippled, constantly throughout. In here, much less so. And then an example of something that really annoys me. So this is when Katrin has just joined the script writing team. There's two men and her. One of whom's called Buckley. No, it's not your fault. It's just Buckley enjoying his little bit of power. He uses perfectionism as an excuse for brute laziness. I'm only grateful that there's someone in here who's on my side. She gave a brisk smile and then raised her head sharply like a pointer. She said, I can actually smell him. There's a Buckley-shaped scent hovering just above this chair. 3 parts ego to 1 part hair oil. Tell me, does he ever try it on with you? Katrin hesitated. You mean? Chase you around the desk, pinch your behind? No, not as such. Is that so? Phil gave her a long look, part warning, part disbelief. Only he has a frightful reputation with pretty girls. Don't say I didn't tell you. She left with the pages of the script, and Katrin sat for a while, twirling the pencil between her fingers. It was quite true that Buckley had never pinched her behind or chased her around the desk. He had, however, on her very first day in the office, tactfully choosing a moment when Parfit had gone to the gents, informed her that she was a very attractive young woman, that she must be awfully lonely during the many evenings when her husband was on duty, and that it was only the fact that Ellis was, in effect, serving his country that prevented him, Buckley, from doing something about it. So that's the type of writing I really dislike. It's totally telegraphed. The two women in the office are having a conversation about Buckley's terrible reputation, and then we get a flashback. We don't even get apart from the fact it's telegraphed of a future act that will happen. It's not even that, it's a flashback. And, and on to the other one, the Dan Zahavi, Phenomenology, the basics. So this is a really good, accessible introduction into phenomenology, looking at writers like Husserl, Heidegger, Sartre and Merleau-Ponty. It's not over jargonised, it's not too dense, and it's basically a philosophy that is looking to, instead of keeping them separate, to bring together objectivity versus subjectivity, mind versus the material objective world, etc. That's sort of what the philosophy does. It seems slightly unsatisfactory to me. It's almost like a a filter with which you live your life, that you're always examining and questioning things rather than providing any answers. So in that respect, it seemed like a bit sort of like a religious faith to me. But that's not a fault of this book. This book, I thought, dealt with its strengths and weaknesses very well. The last section is on the application of phenomenology in sociology and psychoanalysis, which I felt it was just too skimpy, and I wasn't very interested in that. But, you know, irrespective of that, I thought it was a really good introduction, very helpful to me personally for my research, and I gave it 5 stars. So if you're interested in phenomenology or any of those writers, I highly recommend it. It's only short. I think on Kindle it was about 180 pages, something like that. And if you knock out that 3rd section, which I don't think you particularly need to read unless you're interested in sociology and psychoanalysis, it's only about 140 pages. Didn't take me long to read. So that was 5 stars. I ought to have said this is 3 stars. And on to what I am reading or about to read. So I am about to have a bath after this video, and I'm going to take into it Music, Love, Drugs, War by Geraldine Quigley, which is your sort of everyday sort of story of teenagers having that last fling before adulthood, except the difference with this, as I understand it, is it's set in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So it's a slightly different context in which to sort of go mad, because there are certain restrictions of violence and community standards and community expectations. So I'm looking forward to this. This was sent to me by the Big Green Bookshop. As I've mentioned before, I have a year-long subscription to them. I get a book a month, and this was April's. So we'll see how we get on with that. So that is my next read. And then after that, because nothing on my TBR is particularly tickling me, I do want to read my next Reading German, More German Lit 2020 challenge. I've read 5. I want to, you know, chalk that up to 6. But I am going to go back. And this seems to be the perfect time to get back to Duck's Newburyport. I wanted to read it over Christmas. Christmas is obviously fraught with calls upon your time. Plus, I was desperately trying to finish the book. Yeah, I did complete it at the end in March, but it was a real challenge, and I didn't get much time to read it. So I got to page 150. When I was going back to work before we were all locked down, I didn't want to carry this monster on the tube. It's just too big. So I hadn't got back to it since January the 1st kind of thing. But now it seems to be a perfect time to get back to this. The reason I didn't get back to this immediately that we were in lockdown is because I thought, well, you know, I was enjoying the book, but I felt it, you know, it's basically a critique of our contemporary society, which is obviously something I can definitely get into. But I just felt it was a bit potentially churlish as the early days of the lockdown came into play, and there were all these sort of social issues about people losing their jobs, or, you know, not having the money, etc., etc., etc. And I just worried that this book was going to be kind of too much pointing that stuff up. But actually, now that things have settled down to some extent, I suppose, we're slightly more in the swing of being quarantined at home. I think this is a perfect time to get back to this. So, you know, I don't know how long we're going to be locked down for, but, you know, it would be very pleasing to me if I was able to finish this. Over Christmas, I set myself the target of, is it 100 pages a day or 50 pages a day? I can't remember. But I'm going to be realistic. I'm going to do no more than 50 pages a day of this. It's a very easy read. It's just the sheer bloody, you know, volume of it, as it were. And I was really enjoying it. So, you know, I'm looking forward. So hopefully, I would imagine that will take me to the weekend, because I am still writing. And then if I do 50 pages a day of this, you know, who knows, we might be out of quarantine by then. Okay, so that's my Friday reads. Till next time, thanks very much.